All right, good afternoon, everybody. General McQuistion, General Simpson, thanks for being a great teammate and being a part of hosting this. General Solomon, always great to have you here. This has been a great day so far, and we've spent the morning talking about how we can make Army contracting better, how we can improve the requirements process, all of which is geared towards improving readiness. So I would like to be among those that thank AUSA for hosting not only this hot topic event, but all of the hot topics and the many fora that you do to help the Army industry get better as we're working to serve our Army. And thanks for what you do for our soldiers and families every day as well. As we've discussed this morning, contracting plays a vital role in providing enablers for our units, restoring readiness, modernizing our weapons and equipment, and delivering essential services to our soldiers and families. So this panel has been asked to focus on how we can lean our requirements and get them right in order to make contracting more efficient and directly improve readiness. In doing that, AUSA has assembled a very well-rounded and expert panel whose experience and current responsibilities give them both a unique and an informed perspective on this problem. So we look forward to sharing those perspectives with you and hearing from you and getting your questions. Let me introduce this distinguished panel. To my left is our panel chair, Ms. Ellen Helmerson. She's the Deputy Chief of Staff G8 at U.S. Army TRADOC. Then to my right, Colonel Patrick Sullivan, who's an operator, but currently serving as a as a senior advisor for the Process Innovation and Integration in the Office of the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, and he's going to be able to share some insights with you as to where they're headed. Mr. Lamont Woody, Contingency Operations for Fluor, and Mr. Paul Milenkowic, Executive Director of U.S. Army Contracting Command, New Jersey, who we've just heard referred to in Lauren's previous pitch. So we've got a very well-rounded panel. We've got a requirements producer. We've got a contracting specialist. We've got industry, and then we've got Pat Sullivan here, who's going to be able to give some insights as to where the senior leaders of the Army think this is going. So, great panel. We're looking forward to sharing with you. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Helmerson for opening comments.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to come speak to you. You're probably wondering why a controller or CFO is sitting up here and going to talk about acquisition. But I have to tell you, my job is to worry about the money, but my job is to enable the mission of the TRADOC, the Training and Doctrine Command, and enabling that through ensuring that we give the right resources, whether that is military, civilian, or contractors. In TRADOC overall, a quarter of our delivery is made possible because of contractors, because they enable the mission, and TRADOC is the start of readiness for our Army. Right? They design the future Army, they recruit our future Army, they train and develop our Army, and they improve our Army. So clearly, contractors and industry have an important role in what and how TRADOC does their work, and we can't do it without you. I will tell you that as a requirements authority for TRADOC and the Senior Acquisition Executive, there are 3 imperatives that we actually look at, and if you could shoot the chart up. The first one is strong partnerships, which I think we've heard a lot of today, but I want to also elaborate a little bit from the requirements perspective on those partnerships. The second one is ensuring that there is a good management approach to obtaining acquisition support. And lastly, that we have a common view on what is that procurement value. What does that requirement, product, service provide that enables readiness? I think on partnerships, probably the most important from my perspective is the aspect of trust. And this is trust between those that are developing the requirements, trust between those that advocate and enable those requirements, which is that Army Contracting Command. And lastly, with industry, the ones that are going to deliver the outcomes that will meet that requirement. I think traditionally when we think about partnerships, building that strong bridge between requirements, determination authorities, who has the need, and those that are going to help fill the need. It is not just start the discussion, here's the paperwork, let's get going on it. It is really building a relationship with our either Army Contracting Command or their subordinate activity, which is spread across the Training Doctrine Command, which is the Mission and Installation Contracting Command. It doesn't start, let me give you the papers and get going. It really starts when we start to look at what are those requirements? Why do you have those requirements? A better understanding of what the requirements are. I don't expect ACC or the mix to become experts, but they really have to acknowledge and understand the foundations of those requirements. Because when we do that and when we enable that information, we're going to get better products, right? We're going to get better sourcing solutions. We're going to be able to maybe look more broadly than an individual requirement down the line. Maybe it's a portfolio requirement that we need to look at. So I think that a successful partnership is not just as a requirements activity or an approver of requirements, handing it over and saying, okay, go ahead and proceed. It is really having that communication, it's having the discussion, it's being able to engage before the contract is let, during the contract deliberation, after the contract is in place, and after the contract is completed. That is that lifespan of the contract. It is so important. I will tell you in TRADOC, what we have found is that we really needed to have deliberate policies and processes put in place to ensure that our requirements authorities, first of all, understand what they need to do, what they need to provide, and how to do it. They need to understand the relationship they need to build locally with that supporting mission installation contracting or Army contracting activity in order to make sure that we're developing the right products, we're doing it in a timely manner. It is going to be informative and helpful as they start to engage with industry, or we collaborate and also engage with industry. I will tell you one of the things that from a requirements perspective that is really important is visibility. And what we have done is created a contract database that has every one of our contracts in it, whether they're ones that are working, they're ones that are in place, they're ones that are completed, and all the analytical data that goes with that. And so, you know, I can see when those requirements or when those contracts are going to fall off the timelines and not meet our requirement. I can see when one is going to expire. And what we've done within that database is also put all the procurement documentation in there. And they go through a very deliberate process before it even goes to Army Contracting Command, where we have our commanders engaged. Because this is really our commanders indicating that this is an important product. We've described it well. We haven't described the how, right, which I heard a lot about earlier, but the what. What is it that we're seeking? And then making that database available to ACC and the MIC. So if they're missing documentation or they need to see information, they can easily obtain it. The second component of that is really a business intelligence initiative so that MIC and the ACC can see where we are from a financial perspective on those documents, and I can link that to their system. So instead of making all those calls and taking time away from what the contracting command needs to do to give me status, I can see the status. And guess what? They can see the status on when work is coming their way, what their priorities of our work are, because my job is to be transparent and is to be visible and is to enable the mission. And I know that I can do that if I can give that information clearly to my partner. It helps reduce that procurement acquisition lead time. It helps improve those requirements documents that are going to come out for your consideration and interest. It helps build accountability so we understand our responsibilities. And it also, I believe, helps build trust, right? We have those agreements. We understand what's going on. I think the other part is leveraging what industry is doing, understanding where they are innovative and creative, and doing our research as we build our requirements. Because again, I don't want to say how. I want to leverage the insights, the ideas, the solutions that industry has out there and apply that to my requirements, because I know I'm going to get better products by doing that. And I think the last component on partnership is really, you know, that partnership with the contract once awarded. It is so important that we take advantage of that time and take that advantage of that post-award discussion, sharing information, building that relationship and network. Because it's not just we're going to wait for you to come back to us. We really want to be engaged with you. We want to make sure that it's not about solving problems. It's really about networking so we can give you the necessary information you need to successfully deliver that outcome. Because my mission's not going to get accomplished without that outcome. So very important for me. I think I talked a little bit about the comprehensive approach. It's a very deliberate policy and process we've put in place in TRADOC, maybe sometimes seen as bureaucratic, but it really does enable the senior leaders to be part of that process and to approve those requirements and to understand and confirm their expectations of work. And we don't do that in isolation. We do that with ACC. So it does mirror their part of the procurement process. We do consider as part of that, and I heard it a lot this morning, as not everything is a new requirement against a new contract, right? I want to have that discussion to make sure that I'm leveraging the tools, contract, vehicles that are already in place. DIUX was a great example. We went out there to talk to them about some ideas that we had, new areas that maybe we needed to look at. So I think that looking for sourcing solutions, and I will tell you that we do push innovation. We do want to try new things and try things different way, and I think that from a requirements perspective is important. It doesn't mean that we have all the expertise we need, and I think that that kind of works both ways with our contracting command. I do want them to understand what the requirements activities are going through, what's happening from a resource perspective, what a commander's priorities are in terms of delivery. And we do meet monthly with our servicing activities. It's a requirement of our staffs out there to do that, because I want them to give transparency, to know what work is coming, to get ideas on ways to do work. I will tell you a good example, and I think something that between General Simpson's team and mine that they've been able to do is actually improve even Industry Day on a major contract and provide information out there for those that are interested in the contract, provide feedback as the contract is under consideration, leverage new tools such as Huddle to obtain questions from industry and put the questions and the answers out there so all can see it. So we're being transparent and able to give good feedback to the contractors, give them opportunity to come back and clarify gaps or clarify where there's confusion on their proposals. So I think that we're looking for those opportunities to be creative, be innovative, in order in the end to produce products that have the right value for that mission, that are timely, because we know time is important, but also will help to enable readiness for our Army. In our case, by designing the future force or recruiting and building and training the future force. And lastly, we really want to ensure that that requirements document and those engagements with either ACC or with our industry partners, they really understand the procurement value. And that is not money. Okay, when you think money, the money guy sitting here, you may think money, but I'm talking about the value that that product, that service, or that supply has on Army readiness. What it will help us deliver, why it is critical to be done within a framework or within certain time frames. Because I think if we have that common understanding, we can network and discuss on that issue. We know that we're going to develop good products, and we know that the effects of those products and a quarter of our capability through you and industry are going to produce those right results for our Army. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Colonel Sullivan.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests. On behalf of Major General Richardson, it's an honor for me to be here to talk to you all. I need to give you a little history on why I'm here. So, as working for General Richardson, we were directed based on the Section 808 of NDA 16 for the Sec Army and the Chief to look at the management actions the Army has taken as we look to streamline and link the requirements, acquisition, and budget processes. And as you know, that's a very difficult thing based on that nice eye chart that Lauren provided us on, shows the acquisition life cycle. So the Office of Process Innovation and Integration was established back in May of last year. So for the last year, we have brought together subject matter experts from major lines of effort to look at those critical processes and those within acquisition requirements and budgeting. We had permanent members from our team from requirements, science and technology, test and evaluation, sustainment, acquisition, as well as contracting. So, but this wasn't just these 10 individuals on this team. This was more broad. we brought into offsites and had a series of work groups beginning last fall. For example, I brought in contractors. We brought in contractors, both contracting officers and contracting specialists from all of the contracting activities to each to get their feedback and get their observations on how we can streamline processes. We did the same for acquisition, test and evaluation, et cetera. The team's focus was on weapons system acquisition and major procurement rather than operational and contingency, just to kind of lay that ground for you. It's also important to note that within the 5000.2 and that life cycle acquisition management chart, eye chart from DAU that we've all been taught from how the Army runs, there's major lines of effort going on within all those elements I mentioned. So while I'm here today to talk to contracting, it's all related. This is one facet, but we got to we need to maximize within contracting, but if I don't maximize within those other parallel efforts that you don't see on that chart, I got acquisition community. We looked at pre-MDD all the way to disposal. So that was our focus. We looked at that timeline to come up with some recommendations that I'll talk about. So how do we reduce contracting timelines? How do we do that to impact readiness? Because at the end of the day, the chief wants to maximize capability, one, get the best value and capability of the warfighter as fast as he can, and to ensure we're meeting the near-term threat, the enduring threats, and the far-term threats. So we had 4 what I would call key observations, and based on talking to General Formica at the break, based on some of the discussion earlier, and what Ms. Helmerson said, a lot of it complements what's been said today. So first of all, promote early engagement, collaboration, and synchronization between the customer and the contracting. And what does that mean? It means we need the contracting folks involved with the requirement folks as the acquisition community at Milestone B starts to really begin to develop the acquisition strategy and the acquisition plan. It means we need to have unity effort among the non-acquisition, the acquisition stakeholders. As Ms. Helmerson mentioned, that begins from RFI to help develop the requirements package to even having representative of the operational community on source selection boards. We have folks from COEs that are involved out in testing for key capabilities. We also need to maximize how do we get at partnerships and networking. Well, we need to maximize what's already out there. We need to maximize the acquisition working integrated product teams that's already in a reg, it's already in a DAPAM, to maximize that collaboration and that partnership. As the PM prepares the performance work statement, we need to make sure that those key stakeholders are involved as they prepare the request for proposal. We want to reduce bureaucracy. Having folks involved earlier in the process, if we have less going back and forth between contracting and requirements and get a better product, that's going to reduce time. I don't have any panacea today that I'm going to tell you all how we're going to be able to cut off, we got to establish a baseline, right? We've got a change in culture here. We're trying to find out how we can link all that. Finally, the second one was we need to improve customers' ability to prepare contract documents. So not only did we look at the contracting command and the 5 contracting activities are looking at how they do internal training, who they hire with the right knowledge, skills, and abilities, but we also have to make sure we train those folks that are working with the contract community. DAU and the DACM and the DAUs are looking at identifying training gaps. The other thing is we need to make sure we continue to define good requirements. What you put in a KSA and a KPP and how you define the objective and threshold If you go way too far, then that's a lot of money, there's a lot of testing, it may not be technologically feasible. So I guess my point here is, while this is related to how we develop requests for proposals and how requirements help in that, again, it's a team sport. I can't get where I need to go without the synchronization of those key LOEs. The other point is that if you look in the FAR 11, there is no definition of what's considered should be an acquisition requirement package. There's recommendations. So that's the other thing we're looking at. ASALT and the contracting community, DASA-P, is already working with ACC. And I didn't highlight early, but it's important to say that some of our recommendations are consistent with the memo signed by Ms. McFarland back in August of 16 that gave guidance to all the HCAs as well as the parks on things to help improve some of the same things Ms. Helmerson mentioned. The other thing is we need to make sure, Ms. Helmerson mentioned that standard tool, that TRADOC. So we did have an observation that the PM has lots of ways of collecting documents, but there is not one standard, there's not one depository. So that was a observation that we can link onto. So whatever that workflow tracker is that helps capture all those retirement documents that all the stakeholders can look at, you know, that's an added thing that we notice. And so they're looking at that and how it can be migrated into VCE as well as the future Army contract writing systems. The third one, am I over on my time yet?
You're getting there.
Okay.
I'm watching you.
The third one is we want to utilize best practices. How do we do that? And we've talked about that. We want to eliminate and reduce outdated contract file document. There's over 350 documents that are required in preparing a contract. That seems that's a lot. But we got to ensure that at the operational level, we have that, what we're going to call the partnership. And one of the best practices that we found, and this is being done with AMCOM and PEO Aviation, is in Huntsville, where this forum gets together. And it's some of the same things that Ms. Helmerson mentioned, but they're getting together to prioritize the contracts. They're working with the PEO, the LCMC, and to get at the priorities of where we need to go in terms of developing the contracts. And so that's, again, it's a best practice that was identified through the group. There's also no lack of enterprise-wide standards, and we're continuing to work through that with updating regulations as required. Lastly, reduce redundant, outdated contracting policies. So there is a 70-13. It talks about the management and oversight of system acquisition, but part of that memo put out by DASA-P is now they're looking at how we look at management and oversight of service, their service contracting, but what about system contracting? Help define what is in an acquisition in an RFP. Lastly, what is critical to the eye chart is contracting is one element, but to maximize contracting, I have to maximize TRADOC's role. For example, and this is important, so just as we want a soldier to be involved in design, build, and test, that's another LOE with another recommendation. But if you talk about TRADOC as how they take the Army operating concept based on the identified capability gaps, they develop the force development strategy. It's all related. If we're not given good strategy and good prioritization out to the COEs, we're going to have people working on things that may not be important. And that's not related directly to contracting, but it is, because it's taken up manpower, and I think that's important to tag on to TRADOC's role in building the design of the future Army. And so that's why we take the chiefs and the SEC Army's strategies and their guidance. So we ensure the COEs are working on the right requirements and based on the identified capability gaps.
Thanks, Pat. We appreciate those insights. And now, industry's perspective, Mr. Woody from Fluor.
Okay, how's that? All right, to continue the dialogue, what I'd like to do, if everyone can kind of think back pre-9/11, when wherever you were. Now, some of you guys were diapers, so I apologize for you guys, because I've got two daughters, 12 and 15, and so I know 1999 to 2029 will be just like that. But if you can think about where you were and what was going on in the Army in your company, brigade, division, wherever, because that was a time of constrained environments, which I heard for a couple decades, but it was a time when individual training was priority. Collective training, occasionally we got to do collective training at an exercise, NTC, JRTC, or when General Shinseki started making the big push that we had computerized training, which was really got us thinking at the next higher level. But at the G4 level, we were turning in these requirements documents, and we were turning in unit status reports that would basically say across the Army, we don't have enough munitions. We don't have up-armored Humvees unless you're a reconnaissance unit. We didn't have the word outer tactical vest then. We still have Vietnam-era flak jackets, but we don't have enough to go around. So that was kind of our world. We woke up after 9/11, and all of a sudden the acquisition and the requirements world kicked into gear. I mean, what we couldn't see before, the processes, and the chart that was just up there, the processes kicked in. And we saw the birth that someone mentioned earlier, the Rapid Equipping Force, Asymmetrical Warfare Group, the Counter-IED, Army Counter-IED Task Force, which became JIDO and now JIDA. So we saw this rush of new technologies and then the being able to move equipment out and sustain it very, very quickly. And so the world went from, so if you can see our world, it kind of went from, we were just trying to get trained and get enough munitions and equipment, to now we're out there in the fight and we're pushing it, to now we're in this world that everything is about readiness. And they aren't compatible. There's a string along this path that is, but by and large, bringing it together, and General Simpson, hearing you speak about set the theater had me twist my thoughts just a little bit. But here's what let's look at. So when General Dick Formica asked me to come up with an example. So the example that, in terms of set the theater, what we wanted to do. And Greg, can you get that up, please? Is it up? Oh, there we go. Okay. So basically, I wanted to take based on your comments this morning, put an operational kind of thought process up here. As we're talking about leaning requirements and contracts, because as we came up in the last two dispensations that I just described, the requirements come in stovepipe, and so and I want to say this because from the 6 years that I got to work in the JIDO world, the requirements came in piecemeal, and they were handed to you piecemeal, your team, not talking to you as a wider community. And the argument I want to make over the next few minutes is that we've got to lean into the requirements back up higher. Now that the Chief of Staff of the Army is setting on the AROC, we've got to figure out how to hand you and TRADOC a coordinated package. And I want to just use set the theater as an example, if I could. All right, so this chart, the way it's put together in the upper left-hand corner is just basically, the world from Congress down to the requirements coming out of the AROC. So that's basically what you see with a little mix of a COCOM. So in terms of set the theater, when we look at the, let's just deploy a unit. And I'm sorry I didn't use Africa, sir. I apologize. But what was available here? I could have used Ebola. That's exactly right. So let's think about right now. We have both the contracting support brigades. We've got the deploying unit, and we also have the Army field support brigades, all co-located, ready to deploy. So the contracts that we have under the Eagle contract come in to show up, get everything loaded, vehicles out there. They either hit the rail or they'll fly. So now they fly in, and now if you go down this, so you have the alert symbol deployed. So it's a whole team effort, active duty. You've got the contractors out. You've got all your DA civilians, and now we have to put something together for it. and that's what you're being tasked from a contractual basis. So we have the pre-position sets. They'll come from wherever they're designated from, cherry pick, pulled out, different contract, different mechanism, different ACO, PCO, COR, a whole levy of government people following around each contract, grading it, reporting. And then you have the power services that's under even a different contract, which is the Corps of Engineer Power Services, which General Pegues looking at it, possibly pulling that under something more reactive, probably under what you're looking at, sir. And then we have the reception ops, the owner movement, the operational bases as you kick them out, and the point the point to share is that why are we discussing this now? Why is it important in this dialogue? And it is that every 5 years, those who watch the clock, those who watch the NBA and you watch it as it goes down to the last minute, those who watch Eagle, LogCap, these giant programs that Jay and General Simpson monitor, it's a dispensation. It's going to be once in the 5 years, and actually in the 10-year of a LogCap, that there's an opportunity for the requirements to assess what requirements of realigning the contract tools would best serve setting the theater. And if it's multiple 6, 10, 20 contractors with 150 people bidding on every one, maybe so. But the risk is that we unhinge this flow to set the theater if we're not careful. And some of these theaters we've not been to yet, and we're just scraping the surface in Africa. I mean, it's as both of you know. But what we want to be able to do, I mean, we collectively, and I mean, I hate to use we, but we, everyone in this room, our goal is that when the soldier arrives from any fort, when he gets out there to the staging area and he turns that ignition, it's on, it's working, and his comms are up, his munitions are there, and that is what we're going to have to do. All right, so 2017, these contracts, you're doing them, you're in requirement mode, Jay, I know that, And then basically 2018, it becomes important because all these contracts, whatever the requirements were, they're set in stone, and they're set in stone for 5 years, and some are set in stone for 10. And so right now, Jay early talked about, what the commander knows in the field. The commanders aren't even in the field, some of these places that we're going to go. That's why these Annex Ws have to be looked at collectively so we can help the requirements guy hand off requirements to each of you to deliver those. And the spreadsheet you talked about, this common operating picture, I mean, that's what it seems like we're going to need for every theater. And you may have to take on a joint role instead of just an Army role because we're supporting everybody out there, as you know. Yeah, don't remind. Okay. And so the real question is that we got to get to here is why this group? And this group is, if we have to wait 5 years, we have to wait on 3 more General Simpsons, 3 more Ed Dailies, and another 1 to 2 AMC commanders. Now is a great time, and if not, then we'll have this conversation at Hot Topics 4 or 5 years from now, sir, and we don't want to do that. So I'll just push to my last sentence here, if you don't mind, sir.
2 more slides.
Okay, pop those up real quick because
We gotta go fast so we get some questions.
Okay, I got on. Pop. Next, Greg, next slide. He's going to roll that out. So that basically is what I was describing. I didn't want to distract but basically these are the areas. Here's all the activities by time to set the theater. And then go to the next slide, please. All right. Sorry, I didn't talk. And basically, by integrating these requirements, you would be handed something to contract. But right now, when you get them in piecemeal, is my biggest point here, you have to deliver them. Okay, last sentence. All right, so basically, our topic, leaning requirement development and the contracting process. What I want to say is basically this will allow Perna and Simpson to deliver the chief and the president the capability not only to set a single theater, which is about all we can do right now, but to create and sustain a warm-based capability to set the globe. So I'll leave that with you, sir, all the way.
Okay, thanks. And Mr. Milenkowic, you get to pull all this together.
All right,
Right.
I'll try to be quick so we get the questions.
No, you can take, you gotta, we want to make sure we hear from Army Contracting Command, New Jersey. You gotta deliver the requirements here into some sort of contract.
Okay. Right, well, I think so. So, my name's Paul Milenkowic. I'm the Executive Director, Army Contracting Command, New Jersey. And we're responsible for supporting some of the PO customers we support is PO Ammo, PO Soldier, PO EIS. The RDECOM there, the portion of that is the RDEC, the Armaments Engineering Center, and actually some special customers in the audience to include DIUX, I'll say at the OSD level. Our main resources are 325 associates that work for ACC New Jersey. There are force multiplier for the Army, if you will. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, and so as you may gather, we do a lot of the way we execute our mission is through contracts, cooperative agreements, grants, or other transactions. So we're using all the tools in the toolbox to do that. And we are leveraging that experience in prototyping for other transactions. And hopefully we can use those lessons learned and experiences to lean the FAR process. But what's really nice about working in that other transaction authority is many of the aspects of the process aren't dictated at all. So we have a lot of latitude within the law and the regulation to really lay out the process to drive outcomes versus the opposite way. So with that flexibility, our real challenge there is to translate those experiences and good things we're doing there over to the FAR and with the processes we're using there. So over the last 2 years, the command has brought in some trainers to train our workforce in lean contracting methods. So over 50 personnel have been trained at ACC New Jersey. I know hundreds across ACC in general. So we are learning it, the workforce is learning it, and we are working real projects today. For example, we're doing some things with internal staffing of documents. Instead of doing them in sequence, we're doing things in parallel. We're also looking on projects under our credit card program, and so we have quite a few in the hopper, if you will. We also have an organizational mandate to suggest changes to anything that's non-value added. We have an inbox there that anyone can submit that suggestion. We also encourage to enhance communication when we're doing the requirements build with our customers, both inside and outside the government. And I think the one thing that DIUX brings that I don't know that we always do well in some of our customers is really knowing the marketplace. So, DIUX has some technologists out there leaning forward and going into the Silicon Valleys and other areas of the country and really getting to know the marketplace. And I think that's really important. I think that's an area we could do better at. And then also just by that, you can know what is possible instead of throwing out a requirements out there that you may or may not be able to have fulfilled by industry. So we encourage the workforce. It was talked about a lot today, pre-solicitation to encourage that communication to drive better outcomes. Because we want to ensure the requirements are obtainable and not just, I'll say, some marketing ploy by someone coming in to see us in the office. So we do want to make sure we do that, but we need to do our due diligence to understand that. So we do conduct industry days, and we do train the workforce routinely on effective communication and also fair treatment in the process, but not necessarily equal treatment, if you will. And the question is how can we do more of that better communication given the constraint of resources that we have. So with that, I guess I'll turn it back to you, Dick, and probably get to some Q&As, right?
Perfect, thank you. And again, we've been able to give the broad perspective from the requirements across the full length of the process. So we're looking forward to your questions. We have a few already. I'm going to let Ms. Helmerson address the first one that came to her.
All right, so regarding the chart that we showed with regard to TRADOC is regarding the topic of procurement value, oversight, performance, and value. Does the TRADOC G8 also oversee these functions, or are they decentralized to the centers of excellence, and who runs the COR programs? So for the CORs are intended.
Yeah, could you put Ms. Helmerson's chart back up, please? Thanks, sir.
It's the bottom red component on this chart. So for the CORs, our CORs are required to meet ACC's policy and the FAR guidance. And our job is to ensure that they are doing so, that they are not overstepping in terms of how many activities they manage, and that they're actually producing the right results. That, you know, do they need more training? Do they need more engagement? So we're on this, you know, how do we evaluate procurement guidance? Really, the value is twofold, right? So the first one, it is that commander at the center. Is that contract producing the valuable outcome that they need in order to execute their mission? And if it's not, is that because they haven't defined their requirements correctly? Is that because we're not giving right feedback? Is that because the documents themselves are not explicit, or we don't have the right communication network? Or is it because we're not the contractor's not delivering? And in all of those cases, all need to be held accountable, right? So if that's an internal issue, we need to fix it, and we need to fix it fast. If it's something in the networking between, we need to enable that, and we need to make sure that we kind of build that relationship. So yes, I do have oversight of it, and it is a component as activities within TRADOC come in for approval. They do have to describe their history. They have to describe specifically on contracts what the last contract looked like, how they ensured capability, how it delivered value, because we want to make sure that we are improving our process as we go, because we know that if we don't, we're not enabling the right results to come out of that.
Are your CORs
Sir, they're a mix, right? Because
Are your CORs predominantly civilians?
it is a mix, because 3/4 of our force are military and TRADOC, and about 1/4 is civilian. So it is a mix. You know, if I'm in the capabilities area, it is primarily military. If I am in the training area, it is a mix of military and civilians.
Do you have any CORs that are contract?
Yeah. Do we have any CORs that are contractors? We do out in the intelligence area. Yeah.
Say it again? Okay. I'm getting orders from my boss. Do you have any CORs that are contractors?
We do not have CORs that are contractors, but we do have contractors that advise our CORs in overseeing a different contract, and that's primarily in our intelligence area. We hire people with subject matter expertise to help the COR evaluate the outcomes of that contract.
You got a tiger presentation.
Okay, the next question, I'm going to start with Mr. Milenkowic because I think it's an ACC kind of question, but I'd actually be interested in hearing the perspectives from across the panel. So if you have a thought on it, please come in after. This question is, we talked this morning about using IDIQ contracts to streamline the process and to help get faster and more efficient. So this question actually puts tension on that and asks, how does the government ensure that you get the best solution and more competition if you use limited competition associated with an IDIQ?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if there would be a multiple award IDIQ that you're talking about in the question there, or is it just a single award IDIQ?
Multiple award.
Multiple award, yeah. I would think you would not do that. That would be the exception, to limit it to one of the contract holders. So obviously, there may be, in the cases I've seen, there may be a follow-on to a previous effort where you'd limit that. It would be a natural follow-on to a previous task. That would be the only circumstance that I could think of off the top of my head where you would want to just narrow it down to one of your contract holders versus being open and competing that task.
Anybody else? Thoughts on competition versus IDIQs?
Well, the only comment there is, you know, there was a potential observation. It really depends on what is the requirement and what is out there that's that the quote unquote vendor, because there is some capability out there that is very limited, so you really don't have that opportunity to keep it open. And that was, that was a common. There's some distinct technology out there that doesn't have a wide range of competition.
Yeah, please, sir. You lift the microphone.
I don't really get the question. I mean, we used to get this complaint about the log cap contract and the reason why we had to go to a multiple award IDIQ for the log cap contract was because of this accusation that there was no competition. Well, but there was. To win the IDIQ, even back when it was a single award IDIQ, was a competition. Now, in that case, it was winner take all follow-on task orders went to the winner of the IDIQ. But the fact that there was competition to get on the vehicle, whether it's single award or multi-award, you had competition. I mean, I don't understand why someone would believe that's sole source.
Yeah, I don't know that the allegation is that it's sole source, but once you have an IDIQ, now you've got a limited.
But you competed to get it.
Understand, but for the subsequent requirements that are coming in, you now still have a limited pool. And the question is I think the intent of the question is it, there's a tension between maintaining the efficiency and speed that comes with staying within the IDIQ, or for a new requirement that comes in, looking for a more optimum solution and open it up to a competition. I think that's the intent of the question. Okay, now this one's a mouthful. It's again this one's addressed to Colonel Sullivan, but there's an opportunity for comment from across the panel, I think. And I'll try to be gentle with it. How can we truly maximize the current systems and processes that are in place while maintaining the legitimacy to Army acquisition? The premise of the question then goes on to say, if the battlefield has changed from linear to global cyberspace, armed with non-traditional actors and insurgents, in other words, environments substantially different than it was when our processes were put in, how will we improve the expediency in getting product to customer when it's needed? How are we keeping up with the change in the environment, I guess is really the essence of the question. Process innovation requires ingenuity, and that is negated by the current systems in that chart that we had up. So how do we get from that chart to the kind of innovation we need to keep up with the battlefield? Did I do that question justice? Okay. That's an easy one. All right, good.
No. So when my opening remarks, because you're all like, what is that panacea that we have found? And so I'm gonna answer the question a little differently. So we're operating in as we always do, a fiscally constrained environment. We have a lot of wants and we have a lot of needs. So it's all related. So the first thing I'm going to say is, how do I get us to focus on what we need to do to be more agile, to get at some of those key technologies that we want to maintain our overmatch? And so it goes back to, I'm going to use an example for illustration. I am the COE commander, and I have 10 priorities. So are the 10 priorities that I'm working on nested and synchronized with the SEC Army and the Chief's priorities to ensure that we maintain overmatch and to meet our near-peer threats in both the near, the mid, and the far? So I haven't answered how I'm going to do anything faster, but what I have answered is it's how we have to be totally synced within our LOEs. So as TRADOC is developing the future force, as we're doing the operating concept, the future force strategy, it's all related to help us to get at some of those advantages, to streamline requirements, and to focus as an enterprise all the competing efforts out there. Now, with how we address that changing technology every day, I read about the R-Cyber, that's a whole nother, I don't want to not answer it, but again, the challenges there because how technology is changing every day, and as soon as I upgrade a software version, there'll be something that comes out 30 days later that's probably going to be able to penetrate it. So, I mean, that's just a reality. So we didn't really focus very deep on those specific, our cyber, how to get it. But it's all related to that acquisition chart to get some of those best practices.
Anybody else? Thoughts?
Yeah, if I can just add, I think there
Please.
are opportunities under the current administration to put in suggestions. There's an 809 panel I know I'm aware of. You can put suggestions there because some of that stuff needs to get stripped out. I think if you don't take this opportunity, then you got to stop complaining. So, but obviously that horse blanket up there is just too encumbered with too many boxes to check, and that some of them just have to be removed.
Colonel Sullivan, are y'all thinking about an old term, and Mitch has done more work on this than I have, programs of record? Maybe if we made, I'd be interested to Mitch, your views on this. If we made the decision early on that we're not going to make this a program of record, you greatly in that we're going to go with contract support all the way. You get all, you don't go through what the MOSs have to be and all that kind of stuff to support it, that you're making a commitment to contract, which would save time and resources, but it's a fundamental change in the Army.
So, observation, sir, that we got in that area that you're talking about. So one of the key pieces was the importance of, as they develop the acquisition strategy, right? Like you just said, for certain programs, let's identify that in the life cycle sustainment plan. What is the plan? So, for example, what is the maintenance plan? Is it green suitor or is it CLS? It's a hybrid. Now, so that is a best practice that we're trying to get to. Why? And it's bigger than that because it then lends us to the next phase. We talk about there are certain capabilities that go through the ONS or the GEONS process. And then the next question is, and we're spending money on that. So the next question is that going to become a program of record? That's the other area we're looking at. Their decision forum to address that decision. But to go back to the how we're going to maintain it, that's all part of some of other recommendations and other LOEs to maintain that information in the life cycle sustainment plan. When are we going to, transition to sustainment? When are we going to divest of a certain piece of equipment? Because, as you know, O&S costs are pretty significant beyond just the initial procurement. The President.
Yeah, this actually is I'm going to go over just for a minute because we got a question from Redstone, and so we want to take advantage of the opportunity to reach out to them. This, again, question for the panel concerning, and again, Mr. Milenkowic, maybe more geared towards ACC, concerning operational, may even be yours, James, concerning operational contracting support, what is being done beyond the OCS course to increase awareness and better train operational commanders and their staffs? And then a second follow-on question, is there a concern that with realignment of 6 contracting support brigades to Army Sustainment Command and soon the ECC's realignment, that will go back to pre-report contracting shortfalls and challenges? Anybody want to take that?
Thank you. First of all, the ECC realignment, we've been under this alignment now since about February of 2016. And we hadn't seen any shortfalls in that alignment in terms of providing contracting support to our warfighters, okay? What I mean by that is that what I'm seeing is that the contract support brigades out there working with the AFSB commanders, they're doing a good job supporting the warfighters in the field. So that's kind of question. I went for the second one first, but we have no issues with that, okay? Now, the other one is, the first one was...
yeah, the first the first question was concerning operational contracting support. What's being done beyond the OCS
Right.
course
Okay.
to increase awareness and better train operational commanders and their staffs?
Right. What we're doing is, when we get ready to go down range, well, first of all, we do what we call the operational contract support exercise every year out at Fort Bliss. We call it the operational contract support exercise, but really, we get a lot of non-contracting people to come out and support an exercise where they can get integrated with the supported unit that they're working with and so forth, okay, where they are working what we call the OXIC sales and so forth. And now we got also the class at CASCOM that they go to. But what we're trying to develop also with CASCOM is a requirements writing class. Now, once we get to that, I think that will be very helpful also. A lot of the stuff, we're doing it ad hoc to get to some of the problems that we got out there, but we need to, some of the stuff that we're doing ad hoc, we need to standardize it across the board, especially for our organizations that are deploying downrange. Because what we're doing here helps those organizations downrange in terms of their requirements, getting at their requirements, and we're not throwing away our government money. And that's what we're trying to get to. Thank you.
Thanks. I know we're just over our time. Let me close this by thanking a few people. First, again, I'd like to thank each of you for your attendance, participation, and for your thoughtful questions. I'd like to thank the panel for preparing for this and for their remarks and their answers to the questions. And by extension, thanks to General Simpson for sticking around and being a part of the panel. I'd not only like to close with my final thoughts to AUSA, but I'm really excited that AUSA Redstone has opened this up down there. Not only is this innovative use of technology, but one of those folks that benefited from all the great things that AUSA Redstone does for the community down there. It's great to have them on, and I want to thank them for reaching out and doing this and for the participation they have. So with that, thanks very much, and have a great day.